Neville Goddard lecture. Imagination fulfills itself. I say imagination creates reality, and if this premise is true, then imagination fulfills itself in what your life becomes. Although I have changed the words, what I am saying is not new. Scripture says it in this manner: whatsoever you desire, believe you have received it and you will. This statement goes back 2,000 years, yet even before that, Jeremiah tells of the same principle in his story of the potter and his clay. But until imagination becomes a part of your normal, natural currency of thought, you will not act consciously. Like breathing, this awareness must become so much a part of you that you will not turn to the left or the right to praise or blame anyone. When you know this presence, it will not matter if you started life behind the 8-ball or in a palace, as a poor or a rich child. You will realize that life is always externalizing what you are imagining. Lacking the knowledge of this principle, you can reproduce your environment, be it pleasant or unpleasant, forever and ever, as you feed your imagination on what your senses dictate. But knowing this principle, you can ignore the present, and untethered by the so-called facts of life, you can imagine the present as you desire it to be and feed upon your desire, rather than its omission. Now, imagination cannot be observed as we see objects in space, for imagination is their reality. Fawcett gives the name God to the cause of the universe, saying, God, the Creator, is like pure imagining in ourselves. He works in the depths of our soul, underlying all of our faculties, including perception, and streams into our surface mind, least disguised in the form of productive fancy. Listen to your thoughts and you will hear God's words. A thought that is not felt produces nothing, but a thought producing motor elements reproduces itself. Catch God in a moment of a motor element such as anger, fear, or frustration, being congratulated or congratulating, and you will know what is going to happen in your world, unless, of course, you arrest your thoughts and revise them. Most of us, however, are not aware of what we are doing, so we do not observe the Creator. But we can catch him as he streams into our surface mind, least disguised in the form of productive fancy. If, while riding the bus, driving the car, sitting at home, or standing at a bar, you hear a remark and react by moving on the inside, that remark will fulfill itself in what your life becomes. This principle sets you free, if you are willing to assume its responsibility. But whether you assume it or not, you will fulfill your every motor element thought anyway. So in the end, you will not sympathize or condemn, but simply tell those who may be going through an unpleasant experience of this principle, and, if they accept it, let the principle work in their lives. Regardless of what reason and your senses deny, you can imagine anything and bring it to pass if this premise is true. Now let me share a few wonderful letters I recently received. A lady writes, "In July, my car needed repair. As I signed the credit slip agreeing to pay the cost of $62, I imagined it was a check, for I never sign a check unless there is money in the bank to cover it. August and September passed with no request for payment. In September, a man stopped by and, eager to sell his house, asked me to list it for him. I told him that I was no longer in the business and recommended my former broker. I forgot all about it, but in October, just before the car repair statement arrived, I received a referral commission from my former broker in the amount of $68. $6 more than the cost of the repair of my car. Here the money, like the story in the 6th chapter of Luke, came to her pressed down, shaken together and running over. Everyone in the ancient world had a big pocket where grain was placed and pressed down until it ran over. Just like the baker's dozen, this lady received her $62 plus. Then she said, "For some time now, my favorite chair has needed new upholstery. Choosing the material and pattern was easy, but the cost of $87 had to be imagined. So rather than limit myself to an exact figure, I simply imagined my chair as already newly upholstered. While sitting in it, I denied its worn cover, and when thinking of it while in another part of the house, I always saw it as I desired it to be. In early September, while on vacation, our neighbor had a heart attack. His wife, desiring to be with her husband, asked if their son could stay with us until their return. Since he and our son were playmates and inseparable, John stayed with us for 5 beautiful weeks, and when his mother asked how much she owed me, I kiddingly said, "Nothing." But someday when you have an old, worn-out $100 bill tucked in your billfold and you don't know what to do with it, you can give it to me." And the lady replied, "That's exactly what my husband and I agreed to do." And from her billfold, she took a folded $100 bill and gave it to me. That money paid for the chair's new cover, plus an additional $13. Again, we see the money came to her pressed down, shaken together and running over. When you apply this principle towards the seeming other, you are applying it towards yourself, because there is no other. We are told that when Job forgot himself in his love for his friends and prayed for them, his own captivity was lifted. Then all that he seemingly had lost was returned, multiplied 100-fold. As you forgive another by thinking of him as you would like him to be and persuading yourself of the reality of your imaginal act, you are forgiving him for what he appears to be by putting him into an entirely different state. Do that, and you are substituting a noble concept for an ignoble one. That is forgiveness. Forgiveness tests the individual's ability to enter into and partake of the nature of the opposite. A priest will say, "I forgive you," yet when he passes you on the street, he remembers what was confessed. If he can remember, he is not forgiven. The memory of what was done or said must be replaced by something else, so that the former can no longer be remembered. If the present Mrs. Onassis remains Mrs. Kennedy in your eyes, you have not forgiven her, because you are still seeing her in the old state. Forgive her by so losing yourself in the idea of her new state that it is all you can remember and not the former one. Keep thinking of her in the former state, and you have pulled her back into it, for there are only states, externalized. Now here is another story. My friend went to Pittsburgh this summer to visit a childhood friend who expressed a desire for a new Baldwin organ. Now, owning an inexpensive organ, my friend told her that every time she sat down to play, to imagine seeing the word Baldwin across the front of the organ and claim it is their top-of-the-line model and paid for. This she promised to do. Now, the friend's father had departed this world, and when she received a check for $4,500 from his estate, she spent it on necessary home repairs. But when another check in the amount of $3,500 arrived from the estate, she decided to buy her organ. Although the Baldwin top-of-the-line model was priced at $5,000, she was told that it would be going on sale for $4,000, plus they would give her a $1,000 trade-in allowance on her present organ, making the total cost to be $3,000. Contracting for the organ of her dreams, she agreed to pay the $3,000 and the organ was installed. Although a torrential rain had caused the roof of their home to need replacement, the estimate of $1,700 was delayed. So when it arrived, my friend received a call from her friend asking why the roofer had waited to give his estimate until after the Baldwin had been purchased. Then my friend told her the story of my friend Anne, who lived in New York City. Anne was a member of the world's oldest profession, that of being a lady of the evening. She often came to my meetings, but this day we met on the corner of Broadway and 72nd Street, where she told me this story. One day, while walking by a hat shop, she fell in love with a beautiful hat in its window with a price tag indicating a cost of $17.50. Wanting it so much, she decided to apply this principle. So in her imagination, she placed the hat on her head, and as she walked up Broadway, she felt the hat on her head. She would not look in a store window and be disillusioned, and when she arrived home, she imagined taking off the hat and placing it on the top shelf before looking in the mirror. 10 days later, a friend called and invited her to lunch. When she arrived, the friend handed her a hat box saying, "I don't know what possessed me, but I bought this hat, and when I brought it home I realized I had made a mistake. I do not like it on me, but I think it would look lovely on you, Anne." Opening the box, she reached in and brought out, not a hat, but the hat. Then Anne said to me, "Why didn't God give me the money to buy the hat, instead of giving it to me through a friend?" I asked her if she felt obligated to her friend, and when she shook her head, no. I asked how much she usually paid for a hat. When she told me $4 or $5, I asked if she had ever purchased a $17 hat before. Again, the answer was no, and when she admitted to owing 2 weeks' rent, I said, "If while admiring the hat you found a $100 bill on the sidewalk, would you have bought the hat?" I'll answer for you. No, you would not. You would have paid your rent and perhaps bought some groceries, but you would not have purchased the hat. Tell me, Anne, how much money must God give you to get you to buy a $17 hat? If he gave you $1,000, you wouldn't have bought it, for you are not in the habit of buying such expensive hats, so God knows best how to give you the hat you desired. After telling the story, my friend asked, "How much money must God give you to buy the organ? You have the organ because you imagined it. Now apply the same principle towards the new roof, for imagination will not fail you." Here is a principle the lady used for her organ, but when a new roof was needed, she forgot the source of the phenomena of life. Reason came in and told her all of the money from her father's estate was gone. If you will let it, reason will take this divine gift from you and leave you poor indeed. For you have the gift of possessing whatever you imagine, if you are faithful to that which you have assumed. May I tell you, you have the power within to create anything. Let people be what they want to be, while you set goals for yourself. It doesn't matter what has happened in your life or what the evidence of your senses tells you, the power of the universe is in you. Envy no one. If a man has $500 million and a girl stands at the top of the social ladder, it is because God in them had the desire and is fulfilling it. Scripture tells us, "All thine are mine and mine are thine." For all that God is yours as you inherit God. He is your possession, so whatever God is, when you inherit him, less than all is not enough. Mrs. Onassis draws from a trust fund of over $20 million. You would think that was enough, but you can adjust yourself to a way of life where it would not be. I tell you, imagining creates reality. Believe me, for it is true. Fawcett was right when he said, "The secret of imagining is the greatest of all problems, to the solution of which the mystic aspires. For supreme power, supreme wisdom, and supreme delight lie in the far-off solution of this mystery." I ask you to take me seriously. Imagination will fulfill itself, so do not limit yourself by anything that is now happening, no matter what it is. Knowing what you want, conceive a scene which would imply you have it. Persuade yourself of its truth and walk blindly on in that assumption. Believe it is real. Believe it is true, and it will come to pass. Imagination will not fail you if you dare to assume and persist in your assumption, for imagination will fulfill itself in what your life becomes. Now let us go into the silence.